Good comment.
Yeah, she actually went on public access radio on July 4th at 9 o'clock in the evening, which is sort of odd. And she tried to explain what she said. Now, you can go to my article on, I've got 2 articles on VDARE, and I linked to her audio clips. You can plainly hear what she said, but she tries to explain what she meant to say, which, and by the way, her explanation doesn't make any sense either.
Yeah, she says, she claims that the point she was trying to make is that because Texas has a much larger border with Mexico. Hey, by the way, we might mention that Peggy West is the first Latina member of that board. I wonder if that has anything to do with her feelings.
I'm sure it does.
I mean, maybe she has some ancestors, you know. And she received a degree from a college that either doesn't teach geography very well. This is what Rod said. Hey, listen, speaking of Arizona, and I don't want to run out of time, let's get to this caller. Ken from Arizona. You're on with Rob Sanchez from Arizona.
Hi, thanks for taking the call. Hey, Rob, I just noticed in the news today that the federal government has filed a lawsuit in response to SB 1070, the immigration legislation, which was recently passed here in Arizona, that on the basis that apparently it preempts the federal law, and they're going to try to get an injunction filed in federal court to prevent the law from being implemented at the end of this month. And I know that you're very familiar with SB 1070 because you actually know Russell Pierce, who was one of the legislators behind that law. And could you comment on that? First of all, does SB 1070 preempt federal law? Is it anything new? Does it override federal legislation or conflict with it in any way?
No.
And also, what do you think are the chances that the federal government will successfully be able to block the implementation of SB 1070?
Well, let me say that the 1070 in no way preempts federal law. All that 1070 really says is that all of Arizona has to enforce federal law. So there's no preempting at all. See, the problem is that in Arizona and cities throughout the United States, some cities have taken it upon themselves to be sanctuary cities. There's zones where city leaders have declared that we are not going to enforce immigration laws within these city zones. So all this law does is go back and says local police can enforce immigration law, and that's all it says. And let me emphasize, they can only enforce federal immigration laws. It does not go any further than that.
You know, Rob and Ken, let me give you it's very short here, the exact wording. Whenever they released this today, they filed their lawsuit. The government contends that the Arizona law violates the supremacy clause of the Constitution, a legal theory that says federal laws override state laws. And they also add that Arizona is the first state to make it a state crime and add its own punishment and enforcement tactics. See, that's their little stiff thing there. Go ahead.
They're really on thin ground because, for one thing, Arizona doesn't add any additional punishment. And in most cases, if an illegal alien is discovered by a local police, that alien is turned over to ICE.
Right.
And they're federal, and they're the ones that handle it. So, you know, the whole notion that something different is being done here is completely false. I'm pretty sure the goal of this federal lawsuit, that they must know they're on shaky grounds to try and push the lawsuit, but they're probably hoping they can tie up Arizona in the courts and somehow keep the law from being implemented. I think this is very much a Hail Mary pass by the Obama administration.
I'll tell you personally, and Ken, you may disagree, and Rob, you may disagree, but it tickles me to death that the federal government filed this suit, because this is going to make a lot of people across America upset.
Yeah, it certainly is, and Even some of your open border advocates like Tamar Jacoby, she even wrote a letter to Obama saying, look, cool it with a lawsuit, because all this is going to do is inflame Arizonans, and it's going to get more people throughout the United States to sympathize with Arizona. This lawsuit, what it's going to do is inspire other states to have similar laws.
Absolutely.
And there's many states that are working on it right now.
What do you think, Ken? Do you think?
Well, I think, without going into it, I think the whole immigration issue is a very complex one, and I think it involves economics more than it involves, even legality or illegality. I think it's essentially about cheap labor, and I think Rob would probably agree with me.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
The one thing I wanted to ask, just as a follow-up, and Rob, thanks for the explanation. So what I'm getting from your answer is that there's a lot of irony in this federal lawsuit because of the fact that apparently the purpose of SB 1070 was to prevent local municipal governments from overriding federal legislation and force local governments who had created sanctuary laws to go by the federal legislation. That was the whole point of SB 1070.
Exactly right.
Rather than preempting federal law, from what you're saying, the state was essentially trying to tell the cities that had created sanctuary laws that, look, you've got to enforce federal legislation. So if anything, from what I understand of your answer, SB 1070 is essentially a reiteration of the federal law, not a preemption of it or overriding it. Is that correct?
That's right, and let me say that there's a lot of precedents of states and local police enforcing federal laws. Like, for instance, a lot of people don't know, but bank robbery is not illegal in many states. And yet, if a bank gets robbed, guess who the first ones are to get there? They're not federal police, they're local police. So just think of a situation where a bank is being robbed and police are having donuts right across the street from the bank, and somebody runs into the donut shop and says, there's a robbery going on, and the Phoenix police said, well, that's a federal responsibility, let them take care of it. Now, that would never happen. And yet, that's exactly what Obama's saying we should do in regards to immigration.
And Ken, Ken, you were talking about economics. I'll just throw this in real quick, that a brand new study released today from FAIR, the cost of harboring illegal immigrants in the United States is a staggering $113 billion a year. They say that averages out $1,117 for every household in America. Isn't that just great news? $113 billion a year.
Yeah, I agree. It's a drain. We're already in bad enough shape economically, and looking at Rob's website, the whole gist of it is that we're giving away our jobs, and American workers are suffering. And I personally have nothing against people from Mexico or anywhere else, but I also think that part of the problem too is the fact that employers in this country want illegal
cheap labor
to come because they're able to exploit them.
Got to run, Ken. Thank you very much for the call. Rob, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Wrap it up. For Rob Sanchez, LeadAir.com. Job, destruction, news, letter.